Hello and welcome to the Harrington Quality Management Software Risk Management Overview. You know, it's interesting, risk management failures are often depicted as some kind of catastrophic, unfortunate events, or hey, we couldn't have planned, it's just reckless behavior, bad judgment. I mean, you can't plan for that. But if you the deeper dive shows that many of the risks are due to systematic problems that could have and should have been addressed with a more proactive and ongoing enterprise risk management program. And that's what we're going to show you how Harrington can help you with that today. Due to the number of people on today's call, the phones are muted. We do, by the way, have an interesting mix of people from hospitals and government agencies, which I find interesting, and a few nonprofits. Anyhow, please ask the questions in the question box. We'll take those at the end, and a copy of the presentation is available upon request. What we'd like to walk through today, again, is just kind of the general description of our discussion about the problem with risk management, what a Harrington solution looks like. We've got a subject matter expert with us. Rodney today is going to show us the software tool, and then we'll talk a little bit about the ROI. The failure is usually just we didn't communicate the risk to the top management. They didn't know about it. No, by the way, they get really frustrated when they find about something after the fact. But if we do notify them, there is also failure to manage and failure to monitor the risk. Not having a good process for going through and trying to decide what to do about the risk, if anything. And when we do know a risk, in a lot of cases, it's not really measured well, usually because it's not really defined well. So the whole relationship of that. And then the last one is just, using appropriate risk metrics, making sure that when we do communicate to the executive team about an issue, that we're using them the right numbers to share with them. So the solution is pretty much, define a risk, manage the process, monitor the risk, communicate it, and periodically review it. The good news about the risk assessment tool within the Harrington Quality Management Software Group is it does link to other modules, which can help, from what we've seen our customers using, help them in putting it together and bringing on like documentation or training they did to minimize the risk, a lot of connections that can do. And then, of course, all the reporting and charting available. So, all the risk assessments, the aging of them, initial probabilities, residual risk information, just the ability to get it out of spreadsheets, out of key drives, into a relational database and manage it all as one solution. And, the Harrington Quality Management System basically has everything in it and the kitchen sink. As far as capability of everything your IT group's going to want. But, when we're looking at risk assessment, we want to be able to track them, we want to assign probabilities, assign classification, anything from not a big deal to catastrophic huge. And, add categories based on what your internal process looks like, look at the risk controls and look at the costs, and then be able to put all that together throughout the tool. With that, I'm going to take it over to Rodney and make him presenter, and he's going to go ahead and give us a quick snapshot of the tool.
Great, thanks, John. Let me get my sharing here. Okay, great. So, yeah, I'm going to walk through, show some areas in the risk assessment and risk control modules and relationships with other, modules within HQMS. And where I'm going to start this example is on my notifications area. I was asked to provide my initial risk assessment for a risk record, and I should be the last one providing this here. And so this is just an example how we can provide our initial risk, and then there's also a residual risk after we place any controls on here. So before I actually assign the risk here, I just want to kind of briefly mention what this chart does here. So as I move across the top row, the risk severity, which is over here at the bottom right, will change as I go to each new column. And then as I move down vertically, we can see how the risk probability, which is over on the left-hand side, will change. So, of course, you just need to pick, the value that's going to match with what you're working with here. So we'll call this a 2B. It's critical, but maybe seldom occurs. And then I simply save that. So now I can get back to the record here. And then HQMS will provide an average. There was 3 people that provided an initial risk assessment. If I hover over it, you can see how it details everything out here. And if I get away, so technically this is like other records within HQMS. If I edit the record, I could add some additional text into this field. Of course, you can see text and values up at the top area, which have already been set here. And so then we will confirm this here. Now we're in the controls and actions section. So here we can link to or create activities to mitigate the risk, which I will show more of shortly. Beneath this area, we can also set the residual risk values, then determine if this risk is acceptable. So we'll move on to residual here. So users can set the residual risk in the same way they set the initial risk, which I will not go through at this time. After the risk is set, then we would use the risk acceptance area to say if the risk is acceptable, and if it's acceptable, is it as low as reasonably possible? So that's a basic way of how we update a risk record. And so what I want to show next is how we can associate other activities, records, attachments, different things like that into the system. So I'm going to go to one of these risk control records here that I've already created on here. The risk control records, they're essentially action records that somebody can assign to mitigate portions of the overall risk. And they also display in the actions area of that risk record. So technically, if I go to this actions area, we can see our risk records here. And this assessment record also has a scheduled training record linked that demonstrates how users can create other types of actions from here. So we'll go back to our risk record here. And so, users can edit this record just like other records. If I clicked edit up at the top, I can put my information in there, just like a corrective action or modifying a scheduled training record. And as an example, I'll go to this references tab over here. So in this case here, we have a link back to the assessment record. There's an image associated, and we have a link into the document system. So just to demonstrate how from within any record, we can essentially link out to any other type of record. If we clicked on an attachment, we can view that record. We can see, obviously how we don't do it anymore. And so that's how we can associate records. The next area is how we might find or search for records. And so I'll demonstrate that from our risk assessment list here. And so by default, we will be looking at everything on the list, and I can save some filters. For example, I have this open records filter that's been saved, which would only show our open records, of course. But I can easily add additional fields to this list, if necessary, to search for other types of records. So, for example, I could add originator just to kind of add a few real quick here. And we've already got the responsible. We're going to add the type. And then just 2 more things here. We can add our initial average assessment value to search by that. And then maybe our residual average assessment value. And just to show another example of searching for records, if I go up here and choose this responsible field, I can say users employees. So now I'm just narrowing the list down to records that were assigned to my employees and even to their employees. It goes down through all levels of the org chart if you configure it that way. We have a lot of options on the date field, so we'll set this back to reset the query here. And on data originated, potentially I could say is the previous year. You can see lots of other options here. So it looks like it could be complicated, but it's actually, I consider it more advanced where it's going to be easier to really slice and dice by that date. A lot of companies are concerned about, particular date ranges and things. So there I can easily just search for records created in the previous year. And we also have this layout area down at the bottom. That's essentially the columns that are displayed. And what I did is I added the fields that we specified in the query so that what we see at the bottom matches what we can query by. And then technically I could even export this list to Excel. So all the information from there would go forward into an Excel spreadsheet. And then, once it's in Excel, I can do whatever I want to with it, turn this into a table, make a chart. So any field that I choose in that layout goes to this spreadsheet, which is kind of like a report, which I'll be talking about the reports here shortly. But another area where we can look for records is on our left-hand navigation bar over here. And a couple things I want to point out is looking for records where either I'm responsible or my employees might be responsible. And we can expand our responsibilities here. We have our risk controls and our risk assessments that are assigned. And you can notice the coloring here. Where it's like blue, it's due out in the future, orange is coming due soon, and red is either due today or overdue. And we'd also have those same colors down here in this employees area. So this can show first my direct employees, and then I can expand that out, and I can see their employees, and then expand that out, and then ultimately look at their records and see which ones are overdue. The red is obviously going to catch my attention to look into those records and find out why they're overdue. Great. So then, as I mentioned, I was going to discuss the reports here. So first report, if I go back to that risk assessment record that I was working with, we have a detail report here. And most of our modules will have a details report that displays the information from that record. So in this case, I'm running the details extended report just to show a little bit extra information beyond the detail. So it has all of our text and fields that we set, the dates. It shows who set the initial risk assessments, what their values were, the actions that were associated with it. And, ultimately, if the risk is acceptable, that's like our final step there. So that's an example for just one record. And that, of course, that's a report. We also have charts in the system. And so I'll go up here and then choose the risk control Pareto chart. That was for a risk assessment record there that I was looking at. In this case, I'm going to choose a risk control Pareto chart. We can filter the records first, but I'm just going to show everything on the chart. And when that comes up, it'll have a default chart where it shows records grouped by the responsible person. But just to show some of the flexibility here, you can almost like customize your chart by changing some of the options on here. So I can set this to group by the type of control instead of by the responsible person. Hide the grid lines just because. And there we go. So we can see our various types of controls and which generated the most type of records, which was mechanical in this case. There's also another option, so that's the number of records, but instead what I'm going to show is the average of the actual cost, and also to show the values on our chart, and then I click refresh. So some of our records will let you do this where instead of showing the number of records, we're doing some math or showing some other type of values. So now we can see that the air quality type is costing us the most money, but it did not generate the most records. And then technically I could even save this to my homepage in HQMS, so that if I frequently run this chart, I can just click basically one button and view this chart again. We have this add to my charts, simply save it, and then that would be a link on my homepage. And there you have it. So I'll turn it back over to John. Thanks.
Thank you, Rodney. Appreciate your time. Let's talk about ROI. Everyone wants to get a specific numerical ROI for results like this, which is okay. If I give you $1, am I getting $1 back, $5, $10, or nothing? And it may or may not be possible in this risk area. It depends what kind of data you have. As a minimum, ask your accounting department for help. If there's any data, they have it. And if you make an estimate, if they made it with you, it lends some credibility. But when you're looking at risk management, simply speaking, risks are costly. So we got to spend time and money kind of thinking about it a little bit. But what we started with the intro today is, let's not just think about it. Let's put it in a structured enterprise, data-driven system. Form the plan, define the controls that Rodney showed us, and probably more importantly, perform the action. When you take action, that's when you're going to alleviate the risk. So in Rodney's presentation, he referred to a training event. If you're going through your risk management and you realize that fork truck maintenance is where you're getting a lot of injuries and you need to do some safety training on that, not just create a record that you do the training, but again, in HQMS, go to a training record that then handles all that as well. Make sure that what you did was effective. And as Rodney had indicated, there's a significant amount of reporting capability and charting capability that kind of brings it all together. Risk management is one of the key modules in the Harrington Quality Management Software Enterprise Solution. We mentioned the training system. We mentioned, I think, in the demo, Rodney referred to document control, but as part of a larger enterprise tool that's available. Let's go ahead and, I'm sorry, before we go on, there's a couple questions that I got distracted by. A little bit about Harrington. Been in business for 3 decades. 45,000 customers worldwide use the software to drive their higher product quality, lower production costs, and top-line revenue and profits. The team at Harrington is focused on developing cost-effective tools that evolves as your business grows, and we're very sensitive to that as well. We've created just a starter kit because the enterprise modules we just went through, that's a lot to take on, especially for a smaller company to get involved right away. So take baby steps. You start with a couple, grow as you go. But throughout the entire support of software and services that Harrington brings to your organization, the focus is always short-term operational improvements and long-term financial results. With that, we'll see if we got... Well, there's a couple here. Rodney, one of them said they use DMAIC for risk assessment. Can the Harrington tool manage that type of approach?
Sure. We also have a root cause analysis module, which really flows in with our DMAIC principles. But with I mean, sure, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. I think so. I mean, basically that's really what the risk is. Where we define it. In that risk assessment record I showed, we define what the risk is, and basically all of our steps are really going to work through those letters of the acronym. Really, measure, analyze, improve, control. Yeah, I mean, basically it works through those letters in my opinion.
Okay. And then this one, I think they're a little surprised. They're just trying to validate what we said. They go, you referred to link to documents and link to training. Does that mean if I have to change a document, there's a process for doing change or document changes and one for doing training classes? He's just trying to validate what we said.
Sure. Yes, we have technically they're named modules, but we have certainly areas in the program to accommodate your training and your documents and the approvals of those documents.
All right. Well, thanks, Rodney. That's it for the questions. Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to know more about Harrington or the software, we can be found at hgiint.com or 1-800-ISO 9000 or sales at hgiinternet.com. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.